The unexpected announcement, the Galactic Council, a group of powerful alien species who ruled over vast stretches of the universe, was holding its annual meeting. Representatives from dozens of planets sat in a grand, shimmering hall, each species more advanced and more ancient than Earth itself. The Council had never paid much attention to the small, blue planet in the Sol system, or had always been considered a backward, chaotic place, full of violence and disarray. It was a planet filled with humans, a species that, to many, seemed far beneath the more advanced civilizations of the galaxy. But this year was different. This year, Earth was the center of attention. The room quieted as the leader of the Galactic Council, a tall, silver-skinned alien named Zorath, stepped forward. He raised one long, slender arm, and the hum of conversation stopped immediately. Everyone turned their attention to him, curious about what was about to be revealed. "Greetings, representatives of the galaxy," Zorath began, his voice resonating in the vast hall. "This year, the Galactic Council has decided to award a most unusual honor. An award that, for centuries, has been reserved for the most advanced and most powerful civilizations. This year, the planet Earth has won the title of most terrifying planet." A wave of stunned silence swept through the room. Murmurs spread like wildfire as every alien species in the hall tried to process what they had just heard. Earth? Terrifying? The idea seemed absurd. Humans, the primitive beings who had only recently discovered space travel, being terrifying? It didn't make sense. The Zorath's announcement seemed impossible, but the grave look on his face told them that it wasn't a joke. "I'm sure you are all wondering why," Zorath continued, his eyes scanning the room. "The decision was not made lightly. In fact, it is based on several key factors. The humans, though primitive, have developed a weapon unlike anything we've seen in the galaxy. Their ability to adapt, survive, and ultimately overcome the most impossible odds makes them a species unlike any other." A quiet gasp spread across the room. The species represented in the Galactic Council had seen their fair share of powerful civilizations. Some were old enough to remember the fall of entire star systems. Some had witnessed the rise and fall of empires more ancient than the human species itself. But nothing in the galaxy had ever been quite as dangerous or as unpredictable as humans. "What is this weapon?" asked one of the alien representatives, his voice laced with disbelief. He was a member of the Vrek species, known for their sharp intellect and military prowess. "Is it a technological marvel? A weapon of mass destruction?" Zorath paused, his eyes flicking to a screen behind him. It flickered to life, displaying images of human history, wars, explosions, and chaos. "The weapon is not just a single device," he explained. "It is the humans themselves. They possess an incredible capacity for resilience and resourcefulness. When faced with insurmountable challenges, they do not crumble. They rise, they adapt, and they strike back." The room fell into complete silence again as the implications of Zorath's words began to sink in. The Galactic Council had always believed that once a species developed space travel, they could no longer be considered a threat. But humans had broken that rule. They had made it to space, and now they had something more dangerous than technology. They had the will to fight, to survive, to do whatever it took to protect their world. Zorath's voice took on a more serious tone. "There is another reason why Earth has received this title. They have developed a force capable of overwhelming the defenses of even the most advanced civilizations. A force that is, in many ways, entirely unpredictable." One of the Council members, a reptilian species known as the Zithians, leaned forward. "You mean the humans' military? Their primitive weapons?" Zorath shook his head slowly. "No, it's not just their military. It's their sheer unpredictability. Their ability to think outside the box, to use strategies no one else would consider. I have seen firsthand how their small, seemingly insignificant forces can turn the tide of a battle in ways we never imagined. An alien from the HFY species, with tentacles that writhed nervously, spoke up. But they're only one species. Surely the entire galaxy can overwhelm them if necessary. Zoreth stared at the alien, his expression hardening. It is not about numbers. It is about the sheer force of will. The humans do not fear death. They do not fear loss. They fear nothing. That is why they are the most terrifying planet in the galaxy. The room grew even more tense. Some of the representatives began to whisper among themselves, unsure of what this meant for the future. How would the galaxy deal with this species? Like this? How would they keep the humans in check? The decision has been made, Zoreth said, his voice cutting through the growing chaos. Earth will be watched closely. But remember, their potential is unknown. It is that potential, that sheer force of will, that has earned them this honor. We must respect it. As the announcement concluded, the Galactic Council was left to wrestle with the unsettling reality that Earth, the small chaotic planet they had once dismissed, was now the greatest unknown and the most terrifying force in the galaxy. The humans, it seemed, had a secret weapon that no one could have predicted. Their own tenacity and relentless spirit. As the meeting came to an end, Zoreth stepped back, his eyes still fixed on the now empty hall. He knew that the galaxy had just learned something that would change everything. The era underestimating Earth was over, and the universe would never be the same. The true nature of Earth's fear, 800 words. The Galactic Council's decision to name Earth the most terrifying planet in the galaxy had sent shockwaves throughout the universe, but what followed in the coming days was a growing sense of unease among the council members as they struggled to understand the true depth of the threat humanity represented for them. Earth was still largely unknown to most of the galaxy's inhabitants, and yet it had the potential to shake the very foundations of the established order in ways they couldn't fully predict. The Council had underestimated humanity's will to survive, its ability to push past limits that no other species could match. It wasn't just about weapons or technology. It was something far deeper, a spirit of resilience that alien civilizations had never encountered before. As the representatives returned to their home worlds, they began to analyze the human species in more detail, trying to figure out exactly what made them so unpredictable. What made them terrifying. They examined their history, their wars, their struggles, their triumphs over unimaginable odds, and yet even with all the research, there was still no clear answer as to what made humans so dangerous. What could a species so new to space travel possibly hold that could threaten the balance of power across the galaxy? The answers were not easy to find, but one thing was clear: every alien who looked at Earth saw something unsettling the humans. Unpredictability was their true weapon. A small group of scientists from the planet Zethar decided to take it upon themselves to study human history in greater depth. They spent days poring over old records, watching Earth's violent history unfold on the screens before them. They saw the rise and fall of empires, the endless wars, the atrocities, and yet in the midst of all the chaos they saw something more. It wasn't just destruction that humans brought to the table. They had a unique ability to rebuild from nothing. They could rise from the ashes of their past, even when every sign pointed to their inevitable destruction. It was their relentless desire to survive that made them different from any other species in the galaxy. The Zethar scientists couldn't help but be impressed by what they saw. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the humans were blissfully unaware of the galaxy-wide fear that was growing around them. They were still focused on their daily lives, their struggles, their politics, and their ever-growing space exploration ambitions. They didn't know that their very existence had become a source of panic for the most advanced species in the galaxy. They didn't know that their adaptability, their willingness to sacrifice everything for survival, had turned them into an unknown force that was both respected and feared by those who studied them. What made this even more frightening was that humans were not aware of their own potential. The sheer power they possessed was something they had never even considered. The Zethar scientists weren't the only ones interested in the humans. a representative from the Torkian species who had spent years observing Earth's progress, was beginning to feel a creeping unease he had always dismissed Earth as an insignificant planet. But after hearing about the award from the Galactic Council, he began to wonder if there was more to this human race than he had realized. The Torkian people were known for their advanced technology, their ability to manipulate energy in ways other species couldn't match. But even with their power, they had been defeated by humans. On more than one occasion, it had started with the human resistance during the early years of their space exploration, when Torkian ships had come across Earth's unprepared forces and underestimated the human will to fight back. It had continued with their wars, their conflicts that had ended in surprising victories for humans. It wasn't just their weapons that had impressed the Torkian representative, it was the humans' ability to strategize, think outside the box, and do the unexpected that made them so terrifying. While the galaxy speculated about Earth's true nature, the humans continued to push forward into space. They had no idea how close they were to becoming the galaxy's most significant players. Their leaders began to realize that they couldn't just stay in the shadows of the galaxy anymore. They couldn't remain passive. They had to make their presence known. It was a strange moment of awakening for humanity. They were about to discover something about themselves that would change the course of their future forever. They had never believed that they were anything special. They had always thought of themselves as just another species struggling to survive. But now they realized that in the eyes of the galaxy, they were something else, something powerful, something that would be hard to ignore back. In the Galactic Council, the tension was rising. The council was divided. Some believed that humanity should be isolated and monitored closely. Others argued that they should be welcomed into the fold as a new ally. But what if this species wasn't interested in alliances? What if Earth's true power lay in its ability to remain independent, unpredictable, and perhaps even dangerous? The Council's fear was only growing as the days passed, and they realized that their initial judgment of Earth might have been wrong. They had only scratched the surface of the human experience, and what they had uncovered so far was enough to make even the most confident alien species reconsider their place in the galaxy. As humans continued to explore space, the rest of the galaxy waited in fear, wondering what would happen next. The question wasn't whether Earth would become a threat, it was how Earth would choose to use its newfound power. What would the humans do with their potential? Would they become allies, or would they become conquerors? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never see Earth in the same light again, and neither would the humans themselves. Humans' power revealed. 800 words. The day that humanity realized just how much power they held was one that would forever change the course of history, both for them and for the galaxy. It wasn't a single event or discovery, but rather a slow, creeping awareness that built up over time. Humans had always believed themselves to be small players in the grand theater of the universe, just another species struggling to survive and thrive. They didn't understand that their very survival instincts, their unyielding will to fight against all odds, made them something far more dangerous than any advanced weapon or technology could ever achieve. It wasn't until the first test of their true power that humanity understood what the galaxy had feared all along. It all began with the discovery of an ancient alien relic, buried deep beneath the surface of one of Earth's forgotten continents. It wasn't the relic itself that was of immediate interest to the scientists who uncovered it, but the technology hidden within. It was a power source like no other, a device that defied understanding, a weapon capable of manipulating energy on a scale so vast that even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy would struggle to comprehend it. The humans had never seen anything like it, but they quickly realized its potential, and that's when the true terror began to take root. At first, the relic was just another piece of alien tech, something that might help the humans advance their space programs, a way to power their ships and stations with greater efficiency. But as they examined it further, they began to realize that it was more than just a power source. It was a weapon, an energy pulse device capable of obliterating entire fleets, a single strike that could disintegrate the most advanced ships in the galaxy in an instant. Humanity had never meant to develop such a weapon, but the very nature of their curiosity, their desire to understand the world around them, had unlocked something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. The news of the discovery spread like wildfire, not just across Earth, but through the channels of the Galactic Council. Alien leaders who had once dismissed Earth as a minor, insignificant planet, suddenly found themselves scrambling to understand what had just happened. A race of beings with no formal space-age training had stumbled upon technology that could rival anything the galaxy had seen. It wasn't just a weapon. It was the power to change the balance of the entire universe. If humanity learned to harness this energy, there was no telling what they might do with it. As the humans experimented with the relic, they found that it could be controlled, manipulated, and even replicated. The first test of this new power came when a small team of engineers set up the device in a remote area of Earth, far from the eyes of the public. What happened next shook them to their core. The energy pulse that erupted from the device was so powerful that it cracked the very fabric of space itself, creating a shockwave that was felt throughout the galaxy. For a brief moment, all communication went silent, as if the universe had taken a collective breath. In the distance, distant stars flickered, and entire systems seemed to lose their gravitational pull. The pulse didn't just destroy everything in its path. It altered the fundamental nature of reality around it. The first response from the Galactic Council was one of panic. They had no idea what humanity was capable of now, but they knew they had to act quickly. Some of the most powerful alien species in the galaxy, who had once viewed humans as a nuisance, now saw them as a looming threat. There was no telling how far humanity could go if they were left unchecked. If this was just the beginning of what humans could do with the relic's power, there was no telling what they might achieve with more time and knowledge. Yet, humanity itself was divided. Not everyone on Earth was comfortable with the power they had discovered. Some feared that if the device fell into the wrong hands, it could lead to the end of everything they had worked so hard to build. Others, however, saw it as a chance to claim their place in the galaxy, to force the universe to acknowledge them as equals. It wasn't just the weapon that divided them, it was what they would do with it. The more the humans studied the relic, the more they began to understand the full scope of its capabilities. It wasn't just about destruction. The device was more than a tool of war. It was a key to unlocking untapped potential, a way to bend the very laws of physics to their will. But with great power came an even greater responsibility. Some feared that using it would be like opening Pandora's box, unleashing a force that could not be controlled once it was set in motion. Others, however, believed that humanity's survival depended on embracing this new reality, that if they didn't act now, they would never have the chance to shape the future of the galaxy. Across the galaxy, the most advanced civilizations watched with growing fear as humanity's power unfolded before them. They had underestimated humans for so long, viewing them as nothing more than a fleeting species with no real future in the cosmos. But the discovery of the relic had shattered that perception. The humans had become something else entirely. They weren't just survivors, they were potential conquerors, capable of wielding a power that could reshape the galaxy. And yet, the council members still didn't fully understand what that meant. Would humanity use their newfound strength to protect themselves, or would they become the galaxy's greatest threat? As tensions rose and the debate within the Galactic Council grew fiercer, humans began to realize that their destiny was no longer in their own hands. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested on how they chose to wield their newfound power. Would they use it for good, or would they give in to the temptation of domination and revenge? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. Humanity's true power had been revealed, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Galactic War begins. 800 words. The moment the power of humanity was fully understood across the galaxy, the fear that had simmered quietly beneath the surface erupted into open panic. The Galactic Council knew that it could no longer afford to sit back and wait. They had seen enough. They had seen how easily a species that was once insignificant could rise to dominance if left unchecked. Earth had become more than just a planet. It had become a potential ticking time bomb. The discovery of the energy pulse weapon was only the beginning, and now every alien species in the galaxy wondered what humanity would do next. The reality was clear. Humanity had become the most unpredictable force in the universe, and the galaxy was about to face the consequences. The first sign of the approaching storm came when the Vrexian war fleets began to gather near Earth's orbit. Their ships, massive and imposing, moved in tight formation like a pack of predators preparing to strike. The Vrexians had always been known for their superior military tactics and cutting-edge technology, but even they understood the danger that Earth posed. Now there was no longer any question in their minds about how far humanity would go. If provoked, they had to make a move first before the humans became a threat to the entire galaxy. The Vrexians issued an ultimatum to Earth: either submit to galactic rule or face complete annihilation. It was a simple decision for them, but for Earth, it was a moment that would define their future. Humanity's response was swift and unexpected. It came in the form of a single broadcast transmitted across the galaxy. A young human leader, someone who had never known the weight of full-scale galactic war, stepped forward with an unshaken resolve on his face. He addressed the Vrexian fleet in the cold silence of space. As his voice echoed across the galaxy, he didn't plead or beg for peace. Instead, he made one thing clear: Earth would not be intimidated. No longer would they bend to the will of alien empires. Humanity had stood for survival, for freedom, and now they would stand for something greater. They would fight for their right to exist. They would fight to protect their planet. And they would fight to prove that they were not to be underestimated. Across the Vrexian fleet, officers exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't the response they had expected from a species they believed was still in its infancy. They had assumed humanity would cower before them, but instead, they found themselves facing a species that was prepared to fight back with everything. They had no one in the fleet could deny the power in the human's voice or the weight of his words. Earth had just made its stand clear to the galaxy, and there would be no turning back. The first shots were fired. The battle for Earth had begun. It wasn't just a war between humans and the Vrexians. It became a symbolic battle for the survival of the entire human race. The conflict quickly spread to other parts of the galaxy as other species, watching from the sidelines, decided to take sides with the Vrexians. Some saw the humans' defiance as a threat to their own security, while others began to question whether Earth was worth the risk of angering the Galactic Council. After all, if the humans could defeat the Vrexians, what would stop them from coming for other empires who stood in their way? The question spread like wildfire, and before long the war had expanded to a galactic scale on Earth itself. Humans scrambled to prepare for the conflict. Many were still unaware of the true scope of what was unfolding above them. Some thought it was just another political struggle. Others were simply trying to survive the daily grind of life. But as the reality of war set in, the human spirit began to rise to the occasion. Entire cities mobilized in support of the military effort. People who had never thought of themselves as warriors began to volunteer for service. Others rallied around the new human leadership, knowing that their survival depended on unity and strength. They were no longer just fighting for their homes or their families. They were fighting for their very existence as a species. Meanwhile, the Vrexian fleet engaged in brutal assaults on Earth's defenses. Their advanced technology was unmatched. Their ships were equipped with devastating weapons that tore through human defenses like paper. But despite the odds, the humans fought back with a tenacity and ingenuity that even the Vrexians had not anticipated. Human soldiers didn't rely on brute strength alone. They used strategy, deception, and unconventional tactics to gain the upper hand. Every battle became a test of endurance. intelligence, and willpower, and despite their technological advantage, the Vrexians found themselves struggling against an enemy they couldn't easily defeat. War didn't just take place in the void of space, it spread to every corner of Earth itself as human forces fought to defend their cities, their homes, and their way of life. The planet became a battlefield with every passing day. The conflict grew more intense and more personal as families were torn apart. Cities were destroyed, and nations had to make difficult decisions in the heat of battle. It wasn't just the fate of Earth that hung in the balance. It was the future of humanity itself. Their place in the galaxy was now at stake, and the question was no longer whether they could survive, but whether they could hold on to their humanity in the face of war despite the odds. Humans refused to back down. They had made a promise to themselves and to their world that they would not let this war define them. They would fight to the end and prove that Earth was a planet to be respected. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore, they were fighting for their future, their identity, their very soul. And as the first major battle ended with a surprising human victory, it became clear to the rest of the galaxy that Earth was no longer just a small, insignificant planet. In the farthest corner of space, Earth had become a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy would never look at it the same way again. As the battle raged on, the Vrexians and the rest of the galaxy realized the truth. Humanity had become a force that could not be ignored. A force that would reshape the destiny of the galaxy forever. New Hope, 800 words. Amidst the chaos of galactic war, humanity found itself at a crossroads, a moment in history when everything could change for better or for worse. It was not just a battle for survival anymore, but a test of what kind of species Earth would become. Would they continue to fight for their place among the stars with every weapon at their disposal, or would they find a path that offered something greater than just destruction? Deep within the heart of humanity's resistance, there emerged a voice of reason, a beacon of hope, someone who refused to let the war define them, someone who saw a future that others could not yet imagine. Her name was Elena Tan, a leader who had not risen through the ranks of military command or political power, but through sheer determination to do what was right. Elena was not the kind of leader who would be found giving grand speeches or rallying the troops with empty promises. Her power lay in her ability to listen to others, to understand what the people of Earth truly needed at this moment in their history. It was in her quiet strength, her refusal to bow to fear, and her belief that humanity could be more than just a species defined by violence. Elena's rise to prominence began with a single, fateful decision. She had been a part of the Military Leadership Council, but when she saw the war spiraling out of control, she couldn't sit back any longer. Elena stepped down from her position, leaving behind the power and authority that came with it, and decided to speak directly to the people of Earth. She knew that the only way to end the war was to offer a solution that transcended the endless cycle of violence. It was clear that the galaxy feared humanity, but that fear was born from misunderstanding humanity's true potential. Her first broadcast to the world was simple but powerful, standing alone in front of a massive screen that displayed images of war-torn cities and shattered landscapes. Elena spoke with a calm, steady voice. "We have been called the most terrifying planet in the galaxy, but we are so much more than that. We are not defined by our ability to fight. We are defined by our ability to survive, to rebuild, to create a future that is not bound by the violence of our past." Elena paused, allowing her words to sink in. "It is time for us to show the galaxy that we are not a threat to be destroyed. We are an ally, a force for peace, and we will not be intimidated into submission." Her words were met with a quiet stir across Earth, and for the first time in the midst of this brutal war, humanity began to see a glimmer of something new, hope, the kind of hope that could change the entire galaxy. Elena knew that the war would not simply end because she asked for it to, but she also knew that humanity could change its path if they chose to embrace something greater than the rage that had driven them for so long. And as she reached out to other species, calling for a ceasefire, for a chance to negotiate peace, She began to see that the galaxy might not be so set against them. After all, the response from the Galactic Council was not immediate, but as the days passed, messages began to trickle in. Representatives from various species expressed interest in meeting with Elena and her team. They were cautious but hopeful. Something about her words had resonated even in the hearts of those who had once believed that Earth was a threat too dangerous to be trusted. Elena understood the gravity of the moment, but she also understood that it was a chance to prove that humanity could evolve beyond the conflict that had consumed them for so long. First meeting with the Galactic Council was tense, but it was also a turning point for Earth and the galaxy. The Council members who had once feared humanity's power now saw something different in them. They saw a species that had the potential to shape the future, to bring change to the universe that wasn't rooted in war, but in cooperation. They were no longer just seeing Earth as a force of destruction. They were seeing it as a potential ally, a species that could build bridges instead of walls. And as the representatives of the Council discussed their next steps, the galaxy's perception of humanity began to shift. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Elena's message had sparked a movement. People who had once been consumed by the anger of the war now rallied behind her vision of peace. Entire communities, once divided by fear and suspicion, now came together in support of her cause. It was a difficult path forward, fraught with challenges, but the human spirit had been awakened in a way that no weapon could ever achieve. The world began to rebuild itself from the inside out, not just in terms of infrastructure, but in terms of unity, a unity that had been tested in battle, but was now finding a new purpose in peace. As the peace talks between Earth and the Galactic Council progressed, a new kind of tension began to build, not one of violence, but one of hope. The hope that humanity could take this opportunity to prove itself not through its weapons, but through its will to create something better, something that transcended the destruction they had so often relied on. And as the representatives of the Council came together to discuss Earth's future, Elena knew that the war was far from over. But this was the first step toward something different, toward a future where Earth would no longer be feared, but respected and perhaps even loved. Elena's vision wasn't just about ending the war. It was about transforming humanity into something greater, something that could stand as a beacon of hope to the galaxy, something that could show the universe that Earth was not just a planet of destruction, but a world capable of bringing people together, of finding peace in the face of unimaginable odds. And with every message she sent, with every meeting she attended, Elena moved one step closer to turning that vision into reality. And for the first time in years, humanity began to believe that they might just have a future in the stars. After all, the ultimate test, 800 words. The universe was holding its breath as the peace talks between Earth and the Galactic Council continued. A fragile hope was starting to blossom, but no one knew if it would survive the storms that were brewing on the horizon. The Galactic Council had agreed to meet with Earth's leadership in the hopes of averting a total galactic war, but tensions were high, and the forces of fear and distrust still ran deep through the galaxy. Earth's emergence as a true power had shaken every corner of the universe, and now, for the first time, humanity found itself standing at the crossroads of a new destiny. Elena Tana had become the symbol of that new destiny. Her message of hope had resonated with many, but there were still those who feared humanity's rise too much, those who believed that Earth, no matter how well-intentioned, was simply too unpredictable, too dangerous to be trusted. A quiet but growing faction within the Galactic Council, led by a powerful and calculating alien named Krell, had begun to plot against the peace process. Krell's people, the Daylorians, had long ruled the outer sectors of the galaxy, and their authority was something they would never give up lightly. The rise of a new power like humanity threatened their dominance, and they would do anything to maintain their control. As peace talks progressed, a secret meeting took place between Krell and several other members of the Galactic Council who were still suspicious of Earth's intentions. They had come to a chilling conclusion that the only way to truly secure peace was to eliminate Earth's growing influence once and for all in secret. They began to prepare for a devastating strike, a strike that would shatter Earth's ability to fight back and leave the planet at the mercy of the galaxy's greatest powers. But they underestimated one thing: humanity's tenacity back on Earth. Elena knew something was wrong. She could feel the shift in the air, a subtle tension that no one else seemed to notice. She had spent countless hours negotiating, listening, and making the case for peace. But as the days passed, she began to sense that not everyone in the galaxy was ready to let go of their fear. Not everyone believed that humans were capable of living in harmony with the rest of the universe. There were still those who saw humanity as a threat, something that needed to be kept in check. And as Elena looked out across the war-torn landscape of Earth, she realized that their ultimate test was about to begin. This was not just a war for survival. It was a war for their future. One evening, as the last rays of sunlight faded behind Earth's horizon, Elena received a private message from an unlikely source, a former enemy of Rexian general who had once led the charge against Earth's defenses. He'd been impressed by Elena's leadership and her vision for peace, and now, in a moment of unexpected solidarity, he warned her of the impending strike. The Dalorians were planning to launch a surprise attack on Earth's most vulnerable sectors using an advanced experimental weapon that could wipe out entire cities in a single blow. The weapon was unlike anything humanity had ever faced before, and it was about to be unleashed without warning. Clock was ticking as Elena scrambled to assemble her forces and prepare Earth's defenses. But it wasn't just about military power anymore. It was about trust and unity across the galaxy. Earth was facing its ultimate test, not just from the enemy outside, but from within their own ranks. They had to prove to the galaxy that they weren't just capable of fighting, but capable of standing together for something more, something greater than war. As the first wave of Dalorian ships entered Earth's atmosphere, Elena stood at the helm of a new coalition of human and alien forces, a coalition built not on fear, but on hope. It was a desperate gamble, but it was the only chance they had to prevent the galaxy from spiraling into another senseless war. The battle began in the depths of space, as Earth's forces engaged the Dalorian fleet with a combination of human ingenuity and alien technology. Earth's ships, though smaller and less advanced than their enemies, fought with a spirit that was unmatched. They didn't just rely on brute force. They used strategy, surprise, and their sheer determination to survive. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that Earth's forces were outmatched. The Dalorians' weapon was devastating, and no matter how hard humanity fought, it seemed as if the tide of the battle would turn in the enemy's favor. Just as the Dalorian fleet prepared to launch the final strike against Earth's capital, a surprise twist came in the form of a small group of human and alien pilots who, against all odds, managed to infiltrate the Dalorian flagship using the very weapon humanity had discovered during their earlier tests, the pulse energy device. With a single, coordinated strike, the pulse energy device was activated, unleashing a wave of destructive power that struck the heart of the Dalorian fleet, shattering their weapons, disabling their ships, and turning the tide of the battle in a matter of seconds. The weapon, once feared for its potential to destroy, had now become humanity's salvation. The Dalorian fleet, crippled and broken, was forced to retreat. The victory was hard won, but it sent a message to the galaxy unlike any other. It was no longer about humanity's power to destroy. It was about their power to change the galaxy. Their victory was not just a military triumph. It was proof that Earth could rise above the violence that had once defined them and build something new, something better, a future where war was no longer inevitable, but a choice. The peace talks resumed, and this time they were different. Elena's leadership had proven that humanity was capable of standing for peace as much as they stood for survival. The galaxy no longer saw Earth as just a planet of destruction, but as a world that could offer a new way forward. The ultimate test was over, and humanity had passed it. They had faced their darkest hour and emerged stronger, more united, and more determined than ever. to prove that their place in the galaxy was not defined by fear, but by hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Earth had just become a force for peace in the galaxy, and there was no turning back. The future of Earth, 800 words. The war was over. But the real battle for Earth's future was just beginning as the dust of the final confrontation settled. The galaxy watched in awe and disbelief at what had just unfolded. Earth, the once fragile planet that had been written off by so many, now stood as a new beacon of hope and strength in the galaxy. The destruction of Earth's enemies had not come through sheer power alone, but through something far greater. Humanity had shown that they were capable of making the most difficult decisions, to rise above fear, and to fight not just for survival, but for a future that could change the course of the universe itself. Elena Tanay, the woman who had risen from the ashes of conflict, stood as the face of that future in the wake of the battle. She was no longer just a leader. She was a symbol of everything humanity could become: a leader, not because of the weapon in her hand, but because of the vision in her heart. She had guided Earth through its darkest days, and now she was tasked with something even more difficult than winning a war. She had to lead humanity into a new era, an era of cooperation, unity, and rebuilding from the mistakes of the past. For the first time in history, humans were no longer seen as just a dangerous species, but as equals in the galactic community. Earth had earned the respect of the universe, but with that respect came a great responsibility. Humanity could no longer afford to be the unpredictable, isolated planet they once were. Their destiny was now intertwined with the rest of the galaxy, and the decisions they made from this moment forward would echo across the stars. The Galactic Council, once skeptical of Earth's potential, now invited Elena to take a seat at the table, a seat beside the most powerful species in the galaxy. The peace talks had begun to shift into something more meaningful, something that could lay the foundation for a new kind of intergalactic alliance, where Earth's voice would be heard, where its values would shape the future of the galaxy. For the first time, humanity was not seen as a threat to be feared, but as an ally to be trusted. But the road ahead was far from easy. Elena knew that the wounds of war had not yet healed, and the galaxy, though more willing to accept humanity, was still filled with factions that didn't want to see Earth rise to power. There were still those who believed that humans were too young, too dangerous, and too unpredictable to be trusted with such influence. The seeds of doubt and fear had been planted long before the war, and they would take time to erase. Yet Elena had faith in the future of her species. She believed that the lessons learned in the heat of battle, the unity forged in the crucible of war, would be the strength humanity needed to face the challenges ahead. She had seen the courage in Earth's people, the ability to come together when everything seemed lost, and she knew that they were capable of even greater things if they could hold on to the values that had brought them through the war: unity, resilience, and hope. As Earth began the process of rebuilding, it wasn't just about reconstructing cities or healing physical wounds. It was about transforming the very way humans saw themselves and their place in the galaxy. Elena and her fellow leaders worked tirelessly to ensure that Earth's future was one of peace, not war, that humanity's place in the galaxy would be one of collaboration, not domination. And as new alliances were formed and trust began to grow, the galaxy slowly began to change. The cold, distant stars that had once seemed so indifferent to Earth were now a little closer, a little warmer. As the bond between species deepened, Earth's legacy was no longer defined by its ability to fight, but by its ability to unite the galaxy. Humanity had proved that they could stand together in the face of overwhelming odds, that they could rise from the ashes of destruction and forge a new path forward. And though there were still many challenges ahead, the future of Earth now held a promise that had once seemed impossible to imagine: the promise of peace, of understanding, and of a galaxy united under the banner of hope. In the quiet moments of reflection, as Elena gazed at the stars, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride and awe. Humanity had come so far, From a species divided by conflict and fear to one that had the power to shape the galaxy's destiny, not with weapons or war, but with the strength of their spirit. Earth had not only earned its place among the stars, it had earned the chance to lead the galaxy into a future where the darkness of war no longer ruled the hearts of the beings that called it home. The universe was no longer a place of terror for humanity, but a place of possibilities. And as Elena Tane took her seat among the great leaders of the galaxy, she knew that Earth's journey had only just begun. The path ahead was unknown. But one thing was certain: humanity was no longer the species waiting to be saved by others. They were the ones leading the charge into the future, and no matter where that future took them, they would face it together with the same courage, resilience, and hope that had brought them through their darkest days. Earth had become more than just a planet in the galaxy. It had become a symbol of what was possible when a species refused to give up, when they chose to rise above their past mistakes, and when they dared to dream of a future where they would not be ruled by fear, but by the hope of something better. And as the stars above Earth began to shine a little brighter, Elena knew that the universe would never be the same again.